I'm Jackie Maxted, and today I'm interviewing Fergus Kibble, General Manager of Brand and Consumer at Hill Knowlton PR Agency. Hi, Fergus, how are you?
Jackie, how are you?
Well, thank you. You've had quite a broad experience, both from an agency now and client side, but where did your career start initially?
I started my career a while ago on the client side, actually, at Bristol Myers, working on mum deodorant. I went from Bristol Myers to working in the food industry. I worked for Kellogg's for a number of years, but I went from Kellogg's to advertising. And so that was the beginning of a second chapter of my career, I guess, and kind of stepping through the looking glass to the dark side. After I was at Leo Burnett's, and I worked for Leo Burnett's in London and in Sydney and in Japan, where I had the opportunity to launch the SK2 website in Japan, which again was a great experience. And working with P&G obviously is a fantastic client with some really great brands. I then launched beautyspot.com.au, which was probably a precursor to your website, I think. So, that was really back at the beginning of the whole internet boom, and we launched the first online beauty retailer in Australia.
You started Beauty Spot with?
Alison Harrington,
right,
who was previously at 9MSN.
Yeah.
And actually the Beauty Spot was one of a portfolio of sites that we launched, one of which was Toy Spot, then came Beauty Spot, and then came Health Spot, and we were also working on Baby Spot. So there were, it was an Amazon-style e-retailer, which was at the time in a very nascent industry. The Australian public didn't have broadband. It was just a little bit too early. It was a little bit ahead of its time. And actually we exited that company at the time that the dot-com bubble burst, and the Spot went on to become David Jones Online. The Spot was a kind of an interim thing. I was at Burnett's in Sydney, and then I went to the Spot, and then I went to Burnett's in Japan. And in Japan I was running Leo Burnett's digital division, which is when I was working for P&G. So yes, it kind of did set me up for the next step. What was really interesting about working in Japan is the aesthetic in Japan is very different to here. And what to my eye, what I saw as attractive on a website and what the Japanese culture thought was attractive were two different things. So obviously they like, anime and things that are cute, and and it's sort of like, to me it looked a bit cheesy and cute, but it worked. And so you kind of, what I learned from that is when you go and work in a different market, in a different culture, you have to change kind of what you think and make sure that you're really adapting to the culture, not just taking your own kind of sense of aesthetics and applying that.
What kind of brands were you working on?
Well, SK2 was the primary one, and this was before the global rollout of SK2. That only just, I think Max Factor had only just acquired SK2. And so it was really developing the global footprint and brand strategy for what would become the great kind of brand that it is now. I think they hadn't even launched into other markets at that point. So it was a really interesting time to work on that brand as well, because it was, it's probably now one of P&G's powerhouse beauty brands, and it was really only new to them. And I think also P&G hadn't been working in prestige beauty at that point, so it was a completely new area for them.
In your role as a marketing director at Unilever, you must have had some exposure then to some of the sort of social and viral stuff that was happening with Dove.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was probably one of the highlights of what the Dove campaign was all about. It was really at a time when viral was really just beginning, and some of the videos that the global team were making just really captured the imagination of the public, and women in particular, of course, because it was really challenging the stereotypes of the beauty industry. And it was the first brand to really come out and, I think, say something different and start a conversation. We talk about social media now and the language of, engaging consumers and starting conversations as though, we've always done that. But it wasn't the way marketing had been done. Marketing had been really broadcast. We're going to tell you what to think, and we're going to show you the way it is, and we're going to give you one ideal of beauty, and that was it. At the heart of the campaign was some research that had been done at Harvard University, global research which had asked women about self-esteem, and had found that only 2% of women around the world felt they were beautiful or would say, I'm beautiful. And this was a kind of a shocking statistic that we uncovered. And we did the same research in Australia, and it was only 1%. And from just that insight and that concern about what was happening to women's self-esteem as a result of some of the really hardcore beauty advertising that was being, pumped out, and the really extreme airbrushing and unrealistic images that were being, portrayed, Dove came out and said, maybe there's a different way. What was interesting for Dove, I think, was it was very integrated into the idea of the brand. It wasn't like this was a new place for Dove to play in. Dove had always been about honesty and keeping it real. The advertising had always been, real women, testimonial style advertising. So we felt that it wasn't like we were going from one day doing really extreme sort of airbrushing and hyper real beauty, and then the next day going, we're just real women now. There'd always been a thread of that through it. So it was I felt that there was a lot of integrity to the campaign. It wasn't a strange or unusual place for the brand to go.
And in your current role in a major player in the PR industry, how is social media impacting on your work?
Hugely. I mean, just in terms of the impact on media and the news cycle, it's changing fundamentally the way we communicate with each other. Beauty editors or news editors are no longer just the only people who are, dictating what we should think about. And in fact, we know from the way social media, influences conversation and influences the news cycle, that what's happening in the blogosphere or what's happening in social media is a really important place to start. We're getting quickly to a point where we're not even talking about a social media strategy or a digital strategy. It's a communication strategy. Right. And digital just forms a part of that. It's a natural part of what we do. As you yourself know, PR and comms has always been about, influencing opinion and influencing the influencers that are going to form those opinions. This is just another way to reach those influencers. It just so happens now that you can start a blog, and if you're interesting and have insight and keep it relevant and keep it exciting and interesting, you're going to get followers. And so all of a sudden there's a kind of a move in attention from just traditional primary mediums or magazines to the online space. So it's kind of a tectonic change in the media landscape, I think.
So having worked across pretty much all areas of marketing now, Fergus, what's next for you?
Well, I'm quite happy where I am for the time being. I'm not thinking of a change. But in terms of my encore career, I think my great passions are travel. I love food and fine dining. I love architecture and design, and I think I'm going to have a boutique hotel one day. So that's my dream anyway.
Sounds exciting, and I'll be there. Thank you very much. It's been lovely to talk to you, Fergus.
Okay.
Thanks.